is, cool, recordings of products. I'm going to start by sharing a screen, then we can work from there. All right, give me 1 second. Let me share here. And let me put that in presentation mode. There you go. All right. I did my best to reflect the colors of Carnegie Mellon. I'm not a Carnegie Mellon alum, but hopefully you guys, and I appreciate you guys accepting me because of that. Or despite that, actually, maybe I should say. Anyway, like I said, Aditya, thank you very much. It was a really kind introduction. Yeah, when I caught up with Aditya a few months ago, and he explained how, I sort of moved his thinking as a product person through the classes I taught. I was most touched by that. So thank you very, very much. I like to basically help people wherever I can. So that's great that I was able to help you. With that said, let me. What I thought we were going to do is, this is a conversation around how to ace the product manager interview. Like I said, this is going to be interactive. So let's just get started, shall we? And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with a question. So what travel app should we build? I will tell you that this is an actual interview question. So take a minute and, think about it. And then I'd like people to actually just start talking me through how you would try to answer this question. Of course, you don't need to take the entire minute. You can start whenever you want to start to talk about how you would answer this question. Do you want us to just jump in and answer, yes, or in the chat? That would be great, because the first lesson of product management is this. When somebody puts out a question to you like this, you just have to lean in and just start working through it and talking through it, because at the end of the day, as a product manager, whether you're in an established company or a less mature company, a startup, basically nobody reports to you. Engineers do not report to you. Designers do not report to you. Analysts do not report to you. No one reports to you. Yet you're the person who is actually held accountable for the end result. So you have to learn how to influence without authority. And the best way of doing that is when an engineer comes up to you and literally says, hey, what travel app should we build? You need to start leaning in and, thinking out loud. So there we go. Thank you very much for that. That's a good segue, good meta point. But yes, please jump in. Let's start.
So who are we?
There we go. I like it. Good questions. What are the questions might you ask to figure this out, how to start figuring out how to answer this?
How far do we need to go?
What's that?
How far do we need to go?
Great. Love it. All right.
Who are we building it for?
There we go. I love it. Any new voices out there? All right. All right.
What type of travel are we looking at?
There we go. Love it. Love the questions. Okay. How would you basically distill? So those are good questions. Can anybody maybe in three, maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 sentences, just explain, like, how would you go from taking this question and, turning it into a product?
I think we need to find out what, I agree as far as the question is concerned, but ultimately we have to find out what we know about it, as what's out there already, and what we know about it, what we can do better than, and to distinguish ourselves from the competition, and what, most importantly, what problem can we solve? Cool.
All right, let's move along. If you fall into any of these categories, I can help you. This talk is for, this talk is for anybody and everybody. That meaning that it does not make a difference where you are at in your product management career. Whether you're somebody who is, an old hand at product management, old hand, I say that figuratively, like a highly experienced person, or somebody that has no experience, no product management experience whatsoever. What we're going to talk about today is going to help you. And here's why. Yes, the title of the talk is How to Ace the Product Manager Interview, but really what I'm here to teach you today is how to think and communicate like a top product leader. And I'm going to teach you a very simple language that I've distilled over a long period of time that will allow you to land a product management interview, ace the product management interview, impress colleagues, achieve promotions, get raises. It'll do all those things for you. And I'll give you examples of people I've worked with in the past that have learned this and have achieved those things. So, all right, let's move along. So let's talk. Yeah. Okay. So now let me tell you a little about myself. I'll let you digest what's on this slide, but I'm just going to kind of tell you my story. In March of 2013, I was just like anybody on this call who basically was trying to get into product management. I had never been a product manager. I wanted to get into product management, but I didn't know where to start or even how to begin. I was completely lost. And so sat at a makeshift desk in my house in Redwood City, California. I was looking out the window and I was like, wow, it's a sunny day and it's a nice breeze, but and that is a beautiful day, but inside this house, it is not beautiful at all. It's quite a different situation. I was hunched over that desk, shoulders tense, unable to relax, scared, fearful, anxious. I was not in a good place. Here's why. 2 weeks before that day, my wife and I agreed I needed to shut down my startup because it just wasn't going to generate the cash flow we needed within the time frame we needed. That was to say that I needed to go get a job. I had to get a job. All right. And the reality was that we only had 1 month of savings left in the bank and the rent was due. And now we're 2 weeks, like we're 2 weeks past that moment. And I'm like, I want to be a product manager, but I haven't even got an interview. Then all of a sudden I literally got a call that day, random call from a recruiter who said, hey, would you like to come in and interview for a product manager role? And I was sort of like, wow, the universe works in funny ways. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so anyway, I went into that interview. And within 5 minutes of me starting the interview, I literally stood up, told my interviewer, I said, hey, listen, let's just stop here. Let's just call my candidacy dead, shall we? I said, because I have no idea how to begin or even where to start to break down that product problem that you just gave me. The look on his face was one of absolute shock, but with like in a second, maybe less than a second, that look quickly went away and it was replaced by it was a facial expression of relaxation, basically saying, yeah, you do suck, Drew, get out of here. It was a very depressing moment, but here's like, the salt on the wound. The company I was interviewing with for a product manager role was Facebook, pre-IPO. If I had actually known then what I know today about how to think and communicate like a top product leader, I'd probably be here telling you a different story, but I'm not. So anyway, back to that desk of mine back in Redwood City. I'm sweating bullets.
Sorry, Drew, I didn't understand that. Do you mean that you don't think you would have got the role, or how do you mean things would have been different?
If I knew what I knew today, if I knew then what I knew today, I would have aced that interview, and I probably would not be so upset about having to pay $1 million for a fixer-upper here in the Bay Area. That's basically what I'm trying to say in a very polite way. The point is, I had, every product interview pretty much starts with a product problem. Much like I just started our conversation with a product problem. That's how these interviews go. But what I'm gonna, I just didn't know how to begin or where to start with it. And I just sort of was like, hey, let's not waste any more time. So anyway, back to that desk of mine. Yeah, I mean, not a good space. And then I was just wondering, like, okay, what do I do next? And then luck visited me again, and in the form of two former classmates, Sergey and Tony. They actually were both product leaders at another successful startup called Zynga at the time. And they basically reached out to me saying, hey, we've heard through the grapevine that, you're trying to get into product management. What can we do to help? And I was sort of like, wow, you guys are like two angels that just showed up my shoulder. Wow, this is amazing. Anyway, they took me under their wings and they started teaching me the beginnings of what I'm going to teach you today. They taught me how to think and communicate like not only a top product manager, but also a top product leader. And so I just started they just started mentoring me. And over the next week, within a week, they really accelerated. They took time out of their days just to work with me. Within a week, I all of a sudden had the clarity, confidence, and conviction to like go into any product management interview. I had absolute certainty about how to break down or and just basically how to tackle any product problem presented to me in an interview or on the job. Did not make a difference because of what they started teaching me. And sure enough, I got, fortunately, they got me an interview at Zynga. I walked into that interview. And it was actually the interview in the first 5 minutes was harder than the Facebook interview, but I knew what I was doing and I nailed the interview. And my product management careers began. It started at Zynga. From Zynga, I I went on to work at other successful startups. I've launched 20 plus products. I've interviewed 80 plus product management candidates. Trust me, the irony of interviewing candidates is not lost on me. Like, because I went from bombing interviews to all of a sudden interviewing other people. Trust me, the irony is not lost on me whatsoever about that. But the thing is that all about this is that what's even crazier is about, and now it's 2017, and out of the blue, I basically was wrapping up work on I just launched a product for a startup over in Australia. And basically I was sort of like, okay, I kind of want to move on to my next thing. And out of the blue, I got another call, and I got a call from Facebook again. And I was sort of thinking to myself, like, didn't they check their database? Like, you don't want to call it, like, I already bombed one of your interviews. Why are you calling me again? But I didn't say anything. And basically they said, yeah, listen, we want you to come in and interview for a product leadership role. I was like, okay. And they said, are you interested? And I said, absolutely. If for no other reason, I didn't say this to them, but in my head, I was going, if no other reason, I just want to prove that I can get past the 5-minute mark of a Facebook interview. Like, I don't even care if I get the job. I just want to prove that I can do that interview. And sure enough, I went to the interview. It was hard, and I was nervous, but I knew what I was doing. And I'm going to teach you a very simple and fun way. But language is what I call it. Actually, is what Sergey and Tony and I have all come to agree. It's a language that just allowed me to nail that interview. I nailed the Facebook interview. All of a sudden I was told, hey, you're among the top 5%. I was like, when I got to Facebook, I said, what does that mean? They said, other product people at Facebook were saying, well, listen, Facebook only hires 5% of the product managers into interviews, and it interviews a lot of product managers. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm humbled and honored. About a day or two after I started Facebook, literally one of my interviewers sought me out, came over to my desk and said, hey, listen, I've interviewed more than 300 people here at Facebook for product management roles, and I am a product leader here. But he goes, the way that you think and communicate just blew me away. It's better than anybody I've ever interviewed. It's better than the way I do it. Can you teach me? And I was sort of like, wow, okay. So I taught him, and now I'm here to teach you the same thing. The why? Because nobody should have to suffer or struggle like I did. Like, nobody should have to go through that. And another thing is, I once had a counselor tell me, like, counselor literally say, Drew, you effing care about people. Those are her words, not mine. Her profanity was appreciated because I guess it made the point, but it's not my type of speech. But anyway, she's right. I do care about people, just like Sergey and Tony cared about me. And so I'm here to basically make you guys amazing. Hopefully in the next 45 minutes, we're probably going to run a little bit over. I hope that's all right, because we got off to just a few minutes start, but it'll be well worth your time. So anyway, so that's a little bit about me. Like I said, again, this presentation, or basically what I'm going to teach you, it does not make a difference whether you have like 20 years of product management experience or you just are trying to get into product management. What I'm going to teach you is going to help you get to wherever you want to go. For instance, let's take Tony, that classmate of mine. Tony's been a product lead. Tony was a product leader at Zynga. He then left Zynga and became the VP of product at a very successful startup called Lumosity. He then left Lumosity and went to Google, where he's a very senior product leader at Google. When he was going to Google, he literally sought me out. He goes, hey, listen, I've not had to interview for a product manager job, or like a product leadership job, like in 6-7 years. Because I've been at Lumosity. He goes, I hear you give this talk. He goes, can I attend the talk? I was like, sure, yeah. I don't know what you're going to learn. I was like, Tony, I think most of it's what you already know. Anyway, after the talk, Tony came up to me. He's like, listen, he goes, you got to write a book and get this out there. I was like, whoa, okay. Why? He goes, because what you just taught me, he goes, wow. He goes, I feel so much more confident going to the Google interview. More importantly, he goes, I already can see how this is going to make me a far better product person in my day-to-day job. And I've been doing this for 20 years. I was like, whoa, okay, that's very cool. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's a guy that I've been working with for a couple of years now. His name is Tom King. Tom, when he came to me, he had no professional experience outside of playing professional football in the English Premier League. And even then he was a third stringer. So like by the way, he didn't have a university education. And today he still doesn't have a university education, but he attended one of my talks and he came up to me and he said, listen, I want to go deeper with you. I was like, okay, happy to help you. He goes, yeah, here's the thing is, he goes, he's from Australia. He goes, I just moved to London. So actually he left the English Premier League, went back home to Australia, and he came back to London. He basically goes, I'm living with my sister, but my sister says I need to contribute to the rent by next month. So can you give me a product manager job in the next month? I was like, whoa, I was like, hey, I can't work miracles here. I can teach you a language and then you go out and interview. I can't guarantee you're going to get the job because there are cultural factors and how you perform. I can't guarantee that, but I can teach you a language about that will allow you to excel in dealing with any product problem they throw at you, the interviewer on the job. He said, okay, I'm in. Literally 4 weeks later, he had his first product manager job. I was astounded. Literally 1 year, and he used understand, identify, execute, the language I'm going to teach you today. He then 1 year later, I'm still working with him. We were working on something else. But anyway, 1 year later, he said, hey, Drew, I'm going to interview now for a senior product manager job at another company. And he used the understand, identify, execute language, and he nailed the interview and got that job. He jokes with me. He goes, you have made me more money. Not that money matters, but he just wanted to make the point. He goes, you have made me more money through understand, identify, execute than in all the years I played in the English Premier League. And I was like, wow, that is quite a compliment. And he goes, but more importantly, he goes, you've given me a career. Anyway, it's ironic. I actually just caught up with Tom today. So we hadn't caught up in a while. We chatted today, but yeah, he's still in London, still working at the company as a senior product manager role. And now he's up for promotion to director. So anyway, what I'm here to do is I'm here to make you guys amazing as much as I can. All right. So let's get started. Let's keep on going here. All right. Let me, whoops. I don't know why that's going that way. That should go the other way. All right. So here's what I want you to do. Imagine a filing cabinet in that brain of ours, right? Imagine it has 3 drawers. Label those drawers. Understand, identify, execute. Feel free to laugh at any of my drawings along the way because these are all like literally handmade. But anyway, try to make a filing cabinet here to visualize it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3 things today. I'm going to teach you how to understand a product problem. I'm going to teach you how to identify a solution to that problem. And I'm going to teach you how to execute on that solution. All right, cool. Next. All right, let's get started with this. How do you ace the interview and own the job? Well, it really boils down to this. You need to solve 2 core product problems that you will find at the heart of any product interview question or any question an engineer, designer, analyst ultimately is asking you. And you need to do it quickly and readily, and you must do it with confidence, conviction, clarity. That is, if you want to inspire confidence in other people to follow you. That is right. If you want an engineer to build something, right? And again, the engineer doesn't report to you, or they loosely report to you. Listen, I was at Facebook. It's an engineer-driven cultures. Engineers literally would some days tell me like, hey, Drew, I totally hear where you're coming from, but I'm just not building it. Who cares? Right? It's like they weren't building it because for whatever reason, I didn't inspire confidence in them. That's what we should build. The most fundamental question, the 2 fundamental questions you always must answer is what to build and how to execute. Yes. Yes. Question? Okay. All right. Let's move on. All right. Let me just talk through these questions real fast. What to build? What your interviewer is really asking you. By the way, we're just going to assume that we're trying to ace the interview, right? I'm teaching you how to think and communicate like a top product leader, but we're going to do that within the confines of an interview. So when your interviewer asks you a question effectively, and I'll show you a few examples of these questions, but you've already seen one, like, what travel app should we build? That is the what to build question. You literally, as a product manager, will be spending 70, 80% of your time answering that question. Whether you're doing it from a leadership role or doing it from, in the trenches, junior product, associate product manager role, you're ultimately answering that question. So what the interviewer is really asking you is, can you take an ambiguous problem and turn it into a great product? That is, can you find a pain and take that and translate that pain into a product that people love, they want, and does all those fun things that, also has ancillary benefits back to the business. All right. What to build, right? Just give me an example of the question. What travel app would you build? All right. Here are some other questions. Tony told me this question that they asked him at Google. He said that, he goes, I got in the interview, they asked me like assume Google buys ExxonMobil. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, because I was blown away by it too. He goes, assume that, tech company buys an oil company. They literally asked me like, okay, what would you build as the Google product manager in that case? Like you're now you're to build something that, because of this merger, what would you build? So the point of this question is as funny as it may be, the point is the interviewers literally will give you funny questions like this because they're just absurd, but all they're trying to figure out is like, how do you break down this problem? How do you identify a solution? How do you execute on it? I know this now, having interviewed down the other side of the table. I've also asked, here's one question I'd ask. I'm like, you're the product manager for sports at LinkedIn. People then look at me, they're like, do they have sports at LinkedIn? I'm like, I don't know. And it doesn't matter. What would you build? I literally tell them, and I'm like, by the way, you only have 20 minutes to answer this question, which is usually what you get. So the other hard part about these questions is that they only give you 20 minutes to answer them. And you got to be pretty comprehensive. You need to do it. That's why you need to do it quickly, readily, with clarity, confidence, and conviction. because they're ultimately trying to see, can you establish instant credibility with somebody that they're willing to follow your lead? All right, move along. How to execute. Listen, execution is not about like how you get things done. It's about how do you make decisions, particularly how do you make very hard decisions, product decisions. Some of those questions will look like this. The second question is what I got really during the Zynga interview. You launch a game, you see daily active users growing at a healthy clip. Installs of the app too, they're growing as well. But those eventually start to flatten out. Is this a problem? Why? Why do you think this is happening? What would you do about it? You apply, understand, identify, execute, and you can break that problem down quickly, readily, and ultimately be able to define what the problem, identify, yes, it is a problem. Here's why it's a problem. Here's a solution for fixing that problem. Here's how we execute the solution. Here's the expected outcome from that. All right. Cool. Let me move on. So back to the question that we opened up with. What travel app should we build? Now, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to show you, this is literally the very first interview question I received on my second go around at Facebook. So in 2017, I walked into the room and the interviewer who sought me out later on, he was my interviewer, and he literally said, he goes, you have 25 minutes. Here's the question. What travel app should we build? I'm going to show you how I break this down, into its component parts easily, actually simply, and with a lot of fun, with a focus on execution. First up, but we're going to kind of do this a little bit together, so it's still going to be a little interactive. All right. First, we need to understand the problem. What do you think are two things we need to do? What are two things we need to identify in order to understand this problem? I'll give you a hint. One of you said, one of you captured, in the beginning, one of you captured one of the things. What do you think we need to understand?
Who the user is.
Sure. Okay. Who the user is, but can you go like, okay, so, all right, you understand who the user is. Great, but that's not sufficient. What else do you think you need?
Where their pain point is.
There you go. You need to understand, pain points. Yeah. Okay. What's a second thing? What's a second category that you need to understand in order to define the problem?
What's the budget for it?
Close. I like it. I like the spirit of like
What
something that's
people
related
are
to the
willing
business.
pay for it.
What's that?
What people are willing to pay for it.
I would say no, that's not necessary at this point in time.
What's available in the market and what value can we add?
That's a very fair point. I will just tell you right now, and I've heard that in the beginning, you guys were talking about like, hey, what else is in the market? What's competitive? I will tell you right now that taking that approach will ultimately 9 out of 10 times, figuratively speaking, but literally, it'll land you on an incrementally better solution than what's out in the marketplace. That's not going to get you a product manager role. People want the 10x solution.
How will I make money?
Those are fair points. That's more business model. We're trying to figure out like, okay, what travel app should we build? So what do we need?
What resources do we have?
Close. Budget. That's like in the spirit of budget. All right. Any other thoughts before I share with you? It's not an obvious one. It's not an easy one. And so but I like that you guys are leaning in. I really do.
Well, I think you need to realize you have to have some expertise in this field.
No, actually, the less expertise you have in the field, you're probably going to be better off in terms of finding the 10x solution.
Is it like how much time we have to bring it out to the market so that we're ahead of the curve? Or?
No, that's all right. Let me answer the question for you. Okay. You need to understand what the mission, the company that you're interviewing with, you need to understand what their mission, their vision, and their product architecture is. If you are not advancing at least one of those three things through whatever you build, you are wasting time and money. So in the case of Facebook, when I opened up with my interview, when he gave me that question, I literally told him, I immediately jumped up, went to the whiteboard, grabbed a pen and said, look, here's how we're going to tackle this question. You and I are going to tackle this together. All right. And I wrote out, we're going to first understand the problem, as we're going to define the problem. 2, then we're going to identify solutions to that problem. And 3, we're going to execute on that problem or that solution. I said, how's that sound? He said, great, let's keep going. So I said, okay, within understand, we need to do a few things. We need to do 2 things. One, we need to understand what the company mission, vision, product architecture here is at Facebook. And then we also need to understand the customer, but I'll come back to the customer in a second. And he said, interesting, mission, vision, product architecture. What do you mean by that? I said, well, my understanding of the mission, vision, architecture here at Facebook is the mission is Facebook's trying to connect everybody in the world Their vision is to create, the social infrastructure to make that possible. And their product architecture, as far as I can tell, boils down to two loops, or basically two graphs. One graph shows friends that like other friends, and another graph that shows, friends that like particular businesses. I said, does that make sense? I said, and I asked my interviewer, so you constantly, even when you're on the job, you're constantly asking people like, hey, does this make sense? You engage them. So I was engaging the interview, and he goes, yeah. He goes, that's close enough. Let's go. I said, okay, well, the next thing we need to do is we need to understand the customer. Here's my thing. I told the interviewer, I said, I have zero interest in understanding their needs, their wants, and that sort of stuff. He was like, really? I was like, yeah, I'm actually even less interested in understanding their customer demographics or product attributes around travel apps. Like, I don't care if they're 40 years old and they're female, or they're 50 years old and whatever, they were traveling for the first time. I don't care about any of that. He's like, okay, what do you care about? I said, the only thing that really matters is that everybody belongs to a system of progress. Everybody's trying to make progress. So the analogy to make this more tangible for you, you may have already heard it, most likely you have, but like if Henry Ford, when he was inventing the automobile, if he went and asked people what they want, do you think that, they would have said, I want a car? No, they probably would have said, I want a faster horse. Then the follow-up question would be like, could I ask why you want a faster horse? Yeah, because I'm trying to get from point A to point B as fast as I can. The progress people are trying to make is, in that case, they're trying to get from one destination to the other destination as quickly as possible. Oh, by the way, that progress has not changed as far, well, I haven't been around the entirety of humanity, but I would imagine that people have been trying to get from one point to another point as quickly as possible for a very long time. So that type of progress doesn't change. So when I told the interviewer that, he said, oh, interesting. I said, yes, because then if we define the problem based upon the progress they're trying to make, then that progress will never change. But as creators, as product managers and designers and engineers, we can constantly keep coming up with like that new crazy solution for doing it that separates us from the rest of the pack in the marketplace. He said, oh, interesting. I said, so now once we understand this case, in the case of travel, right, once we understand the fundamental, let's just make I'll come to this in a second. I'll tell you what we ultimately came up with. But I'll say, let's just assume they're trying to make progress. What we want to understand is we understand where they're having the struggling moments they have in trying to make that progress. And I said, I'm really focused on progress more than outcomes, because what I've learned over time, I told the interviewer, I said, people actually, relatively speaking, people value progress more than they value outcomes. That is, yes, it would be nice to get to that endpoint faster, but as long as you help them make progress towards that endpoint, they're happy. And sometimes that's even like, all you need to do. So we need to understand the struggling moments where they can't make that progress. And then we need to understand how life becomes better when we give them the 10x better solution for making that progress. Now, I told the interviewer, I said, so what we're going to do is we're going to make an assumption here. We're just going to make an assumption that, that we're going to make an assumption around the customer. And it's literally called a progress statement. And so this is what a progress statement is for me. So progress statement is, when this trigger, this emotion, routine, or situation happens, I, as the customer, the person that's using whatever product I'm designing, I want to take what action so I can, or so that I can achieve what outcome. Here's what I actually literally did with that question. I told the interviewer, I said, let's just assume that when I travel, I'm speaking like a customer, right, that we're building this app for. When I travel, I want to feel like a local. That's the progress I want to make. I want to feel like a local. So the outcome is, so I have a lasting memory to tell others. I said, how does that sound? He goes, that is actually quite fascinating. He goes, oh, by the way, he goes, actually, we've been trying to answer this question for the last 6 months, and this is a completely different way of defining the problem. I love it. Now you can, listen, I'm very humbled and honored that I've just learned over time, and I've had some good mentors along the way that have kind of helped me eventually kind of evolve to this type of thinking. And I didn't know how it would be received in interviews or even as a product manager. And I'm just happy that other people find value in it. So cool. Hopefully you'll find value in it too. All right, next phase. All right, so we've defined the problem. When I travel, I want to feel like a local, so I have a lasting memory to tell others. That's the problem. We understand what the problem is. And we also know that whatever we build needs to do that, but it also needs to advance, some combination of mission, vision, and product architecture for Facebook. All right. So, okay. We're now in the phase of let's identify a solution to that. Let's come up with a product concept that helps people make that progress. So what are 3 things you need to do? Do you think you need to do to identify a product concept that helps people make that progress? Well, any progress, actually. Just generally speaking, what are 3 things you need to do to sort of come up with a product concept? Guys, just lean in. There are no wrong answers. Here's the thing is, I'm not really big into sports. That's just not my thing. But I will say this, I grew up in the Philadelphia area, and I feel like it's sort of like a punishment, but you have to root for the Philadelphia Eagles, which is a professional football team there. All right. It's not fun, but you just do it. Okay. And so one thing I learned, I remember years ago, like listening to an interview, the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles basically was saying, goes, yeah, when rookies come in here, I just tell them like, listen, you're going to make so many mistakes and I don't care. I just need you to play as fast as possible. Just move as fast as possible and we'll fix the mistakes as you go along the way, but just move at game speed. That's what your interview, remember, your interview is only giving you 20 minutes to break this all down. So just lean in and start talking.
So is the progress statement equivalent to the problem statement?
Yes, basically.
Okay, so basically we just identified the problem. So now we're trying to figure out the solution. So what are the components of the solution that we need to look into so that we have a product concept?
Yes.
All right, so we have the customer.
Yep.
We identified the pain points. So now do we want to drill down further and kind of look at customer segments, or you're still not interested in that?
You tell me. You're the product manager. You tell me. What do you want?
I would want to look at like fully, not just understand the pain points, but like have a full persona or customer profile at that point. I want to know Jill and Joe and
fair enough.
I want to know.
Okay, fair enough. It's people between the ages of 30 and this is what your interview is going to say. All right, fine. It's just basically to dismiss you. But it's like, all right, your customers between the ages of 30 to 50 years old, and they travel frequently, and then they'll look at you and say, okay, does that work for you? Because like I'm just making stuff up. It doesn't make a difference, is what they're trying to tell you. It doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
At this stage, it doesn't make a difference. You're just trying to figure out what to build. All right. So in the identify, it's actually pretty straightforward. It feels straightforward actually once you see it. So don't feel bad that you didn't get it right now, because this is the nature of product interviews. First, you got to come up with some ideas. All right. Got to come up with some ideas for solutions. Then you need to prioritize those ideas. And then you need to pick the top solution that you prioritize and design it. All right. So in the way of ideas, I actually, in the interview, you literally will be evaluated on, can you at least come up with 2 ideas, if not 3? If you only come up with 1 idea, it's a huge red flag. As a product manager, you should be able to come up with multiple ideas. I actually have a way of doing that. I basically ask 3 questions of that progress statement, which is, okay, how can I reduce the number of steps people have to take to basically feel like a local so they have a lasting memory to tell others? How can I reduce the number of steps that they do today to achieve that outcome and progress? The next question is well, how can I help more people feel like a local so they have a lasting memory to tell their grandkids? And then okay, how can I help people feel like a local so they have a lasting memory, or basically, how can I help people have that progress in more context? And I'll go through, I'm going to show you what I literally told the interviewer, but so I understand it's a little abstract, but just stick with me for a bit. The next thing is I'll say, okay, now here's the next thing you're being evaluated in this interview is, okay, well, how do you prioritize this? So let's say you come up with 3 ideas. Well, how do you prioritize them? Most people will just say, hey, actually, well, let's just figure out, how much is going to cost us to build this and what's the ROI on it? That's a fair answer. It's a good answer. And you should answer with that. That's not enough though. What I come up with is say, well, look, first and foremost, are we helping the customers make the progress they want to make? And most importantly, are we overcoming their anxieties in terms of adopting a new approach to making that progress? We don't have the time to go into it now, but there basically are 4 forces that determine whether somebody's going to stop doing what they're doing today and start doing what you want them to do tomorrow, including using a new product. And one of those forces is anxiety. And it's actually the biggest killer of new products. Anyway, so we talk about, I'll tell them is it helping, how well do let's say I came up with 3 ideas, how well do each of these ideas help people make progress? And does it reduce the anxiety of adoption, anxiety of first usage? And then also, okay, next thing is does it basically advance the mission, vision, and product architecture here at Facebook? Oh, and what's the upside? That is, all right, fine. If it's helping customers make progress, then technically it's having impact. and that's upside, but impact's not enough, right? I could like, for instance, right, there's only a few of us on this call. So I'm having impact. Hopefully I'm having impact on you, right? I'm teaching you something. But here's the reality is my reach is very small. Like I'm helping less than 10 people right now. What happens though if there are 1 million people on this call? Wow, now we're talking, right? Now I'm having a serious impact. All right. So we need to look at not only impact, we also need to look at reach, the number of people we're helping make this progress, and the frequency. That is, how often do they want to make this progress? Are we helping them frequently, do it on the frequency level they want to do it on? So upside is impact, frequency, and reach. Company is mission, vision, product architecture. Customer is progress, anxieties, life gets better. And then effort is, all right, how much, design, engineering time is this going to take to build? All right. You then go through and you prioritize your ideas and you land out, you say, okay, one idea is like the idea that we're going to run with. Well, what you have to do is you got to lean into the 4 elements of design. I've only listed 3 here because the 4th one you don't need to worry about in this interview. That 4th one is the visual design. That is like how this thing is going to look. Who cares about that right now? Literally what you're trying to do is you're just trying to basically you're trying to get to like progress solution fit. Like, did I come up with something that helps people make the progress? And if it does, people really don't care about how, early adopters are not going to care how ugly it is. They just don't. So the first thing is we focus on the outcome. That is, okay, do we literally help people feel like a local so they will last them to tell their grandkids? Structure, okay, from basically an architectural standpoint, like what do we need to build, right? We're probably going to need to build like whatever, I'll go through this in a second, actually, what I came up with, and I'll talk through that, but let me just point down the path. Is this basically talking about like, what is the code going to look like? Basically, what elements of the code do we need to write and build? The interaction, what's the interaction model? That is, how are people going to interact with this product to make the progress they want to make? All right. So literally what I did at this point in time in the interview, I literally got up on the board, and no joke, this is literally a picture I took from 2017. This is all I drew on the board. I basically told myself, I came up with 3 ideas. Oh yeah, so back up. So I came up with 3 ideas. I said, one way we can reduce the number of steps is let's just assume that let's assume that a mom and dad take their 2 kids from San Francisco to Barcelona for a 2-week holiday. And mom wants to feel like a local, so she has a lasting memory to tell the grandkids. And so let's just assume that today what she does is that she checks into the hotel with her family, and then she goes down to the concierge and says, hey, where do the locals hang out? Because I don't want to hang out at the touristy spots, right? She's trying to get the inside scoop. And so I said, what happens if basically, we could reduce this by just taking the concierge out and just plugging her in with locals in the area that could tell her like the real story, and like she could choose from that. Because the concierge also like will say, oh, well, you can try this, but if you want to learn about a few more ideas, then go over here and grab this book and go. Anyway, the discovery process becomes really complicated. But what happens if we could just remove the discovery or simplify the discovery process and just have like locals, like in this case, I was saying, why don't we have locals like host dinners? And so I said, we can just imagine like in the Facebook marketplace section of the Facebook app, we just have this screen, a landing screen, which is messages, dine with locals so you can be, so you can be a local the next day. And you can go eat dinner with Don the fishmonger, or you can eat dinner with the Catalan chef. These are like local hosts that will like invite you into their home to have dinner with them. You book it, right? And the ... does to say we could put on like a bunch more local hosts. And so that's one way of reducing steps. Another one, the second idea, how do we help more people make this progress in this, or make this progress? I don't remember what we did there, but I forgot what I did on that one. The last one though was, how do we help people make this progress? That is, feel like when they travel, feel like a local, say, last remember tell the grandkids in more context. I basically said, hey, what about the person in a low income area that doesn't have the money to travel? What happens if we can basically like help them travel and feel like a local, so they have a lasting memory to tell their kids? And the interviewer was like, how do we do that? I said, well, we have Oculus, right? Maybe we can just have them strap on a VR headset. They come into a page like this, they click Don the Fishmonger, and now Don the Fishmonger like literally virtually takes them around town, gives them a local tour of Barcelona. So now they feel like a local. They have a lasting memory to tell the grandkids. Anyway, the idea we ultimately, and then when we prioritize this, we've said, okay, how are all these ideas basically help people make progress? But we landed on this idea here, which is, ultimately reducing the number of steps. Just have a landing page on the Facebook marketplace that reduces the most steps. It advances the company, mission, vision, product architecture, because what we said is it's social, because now you're having people interact. We're building a travel app. Now it's a social travel app. All right. It advances, it gets people connected, people coming together, doing stuff together. That's what Facebook wants. All right. People are loving it because now they get to go and interact with a local, not hang out at the touristy spots. Effort-wise, it's just a little test. It's like, okay, or no, back up. Architecture-wise, it's like, well, actually back to the prioritization. So upside, it's like, okay, well, a lot of people travel. And yeah, well, we're just starting with Barcelona, like the reach is going to be worldwide because we're just rolling out we're just talking about rolling out in Barcelona as a test. But like we can envision, like we can roll this out anywhere and everywhere. It's Facebook, right? We got 1 billion users. And then frequency, it's like, okay, the frequency is a little bit low on this one because it's like, how often do people really travel? They probably maybe travel once every 6 months, if that. But nonetheless, right, this idea checked out the best out of all of them. And so we then designed it. And we just said, okay, interaction model is simply this, right? You click on Don the Fishmonger, you book it, and then you go and have dinner with Don the Fishmonger, and that would be the interaction. Then Don will basically tell you like a couple, I'll get to this a little bit later, how we execute. But anyway, that's the initial interaction. Architecture-wise, like, okay, we basically need, people need to be able to create an account in Facebook if they don't already have one. They need to be able to like, basically book an event. So we're going to need we're going to basically need some backend infrastructure, a server that just says, this person's registered for this event and they paid. We need some sort of payment, we need some sort of payment infrastructure to process payments, just obvious stuff. You don't even need to be technically inclined to talk about architecture. Engineers are like, that's what I'm here for. Like, you just need to be able to just roughly say like, well, we need people to be able to book. We need people to be able to pay. People generally get the understanding that you're thinking through the architecture. And the outcome is that people will feel like a local because they're going to hang out with a local. All right, moving along. Execute. So how do we execute on this idea? All right, I'm just going to jump into this for the sake of time. 2 things you're going to do here. You're going to build, test, and iterate. A lot of people talk about building a minimum viable product. I got so many arrows in my back from doing that I like refuse to do it anymore. I will build a minimum lovable product. And what's the difference? People say, oh, that's cute, Drew, right? You switch the viable and lovable, like that's cute. I'm like, yeah, it's subtle, but it's actually significant because what I'm saying is that when I say a lovable product, I'm saying I'm building a product that will at least help people make progress versus building a minimum viable product, which is just saying, well, we build a product, doesn't necessarily help people, but at least we got something built that we can then build on top of to eventually help people. Here's a classic example of this. So I was at a startup that, actually, what's a better example of this? Oh yeah, here we go. So was working with a company years ago, and basically they go around and they use artificial intelligence and machine learning to monitor the health of industrial equipment. And what they're trying to do is they're just trying to be able to tell the customer like, hey, your whatever piece of machinery is based upon our data. Your piece of machinery is probably going to go down in the next day or 2. Do you want to send out a repairman? Like it's preventive maintenance type of thing. All right. And what we found was the progress that people were really trying to make there, it usually was basically a maintenance guy who was tired of getting yelled at all the time when machinery went down. And it actually got to the point where maintenance people would like retire after 5 years because they couldn't take it anymore. It was like literally, there were actually some maintenance people that were showing some early signs of PST, like, post-traumatic disorder. That's how bad they were getting yelled at. So the progress they wanted to make was I just don't want to get yelled at anymore. Help me with that. And so the company, when I joined them, they had built a minimum viable product, which is that it could literally, it basically was a product where it could it could monitor the equipment, but it couldn't actually process any data or no less tell this person that the machine's going to go down. And they wanted to roll out with that. I was like, whoa, let's back up. Let's not build anything. Let's not build anything like that. Why don't we just literally have a human being stand by the machine with some sensors for a week? All right, let's just test the idea. And basically they use that data, and in real time, they can basically every day they can send or every 4 hours, they send a report to the product, to the maintenance person just to let them know, does the machine need service or not? Because this way, if what was causing the machine, the maintenance person to get yelled at was people were calling up saying, hey, listen, the machine went down. Why were you not on top of that? And he'll be like, well, I don't have the capacity to go around and inspect every piece of machinery. No less get data on it like 24/7. Well, now he's got somebody feeding him data every 4 hours. So now when somebody calls up, says, hey, listen, how's the machinery going? He'll be like, well, I'm on top of it. Like, I can tell you these machines actually are all working fine. They're not breaking down. It looks like they'll be good for at least the next 4 hours. People will also were like, okay, great. You're finally on top of your job. And they hang up the phone. And he was like relieved. He goes, wow, I'm not getting yelled at anymore. I love it. That's a minimum lovable product. All right. What do we build here for Facebook? I'll come back to it in a second, actually. Now, the other thing is that once you build this minimum level product, you got to figure out how you're going to measure success. So you're going to build this minimum level product. You're going to put it out into the world. Okay, well, how do you know whether it's, as product managers like to say, whether it's picking up heat or not? It's got heat to it, meaning that people like it, want to use it. Well, you want some sort of pseudo measure of progress, and you want to make an assumption, have a hypothesis around what do you think the frequency by which people will use use your product to make progress. Here's what we came up with in the case of the my Facebook thing. I basically said, look, we're going to build a discover. You basically go and discover and dine with a local host. Now, what the host is going to do is we're going to actually, part of the product experience, the host tells you where locals hang out. So during this dinner, the host is like very intimate. They're then telling you like where they hang out and where the other locals hang out. And I said, the first thing we're going to make sure is that we're going to tell the host that they have to provide at least 2 to 3 recommendations. And one of them must include a coffee shop. Won't go into why, but just understand coffee shop was like anyway, it had a lot of value to it in terms of just making it easier for hosts to do recommendations and people to actually feel like a local. So then we just said, okay, the next part of the product is you will go and have, so you're like that mom and dad take their kids, they dine with a local. The local tells them like, hey, yeah, listen, you should go to this coffee shop tomorrow morning. The tourists don't know about it. It's where all the locals hang out. And the mom's like, oh yeah, I'm all over that, right? Dad's like, yeah, I'm all over that. The kids are like, whatever, right? We're just here along for the ride, right? So then they go the next morning when they step outside their hotel, they're walking in this direction while all the tourists are walking in the opposite direction. At that moment is when they feel like a local, because they're not walking with all the tourists, they're going against the tourists and they're going to this local coffee shop. Now, how do we measure the progress? We said, well, what I said with the interviewer, I said, well, look, what we'll do is we'll send out an email within 24 to 48 hours of the conclusion of the dinner event, asking a very simple question. Did you follow through? Did you go to any of the 2 or 3 places that your host recommended you go to? Okay, if yes, did you feel like a local? If yes, do you have a lasting memory? There's 3 questions. That's how we tested it. The frequency by which we thought people would, engage with the product was that it'd be like they would go travel once every 6 months. So we thought they would at least basically go and go dine with a local host at least once during their holiday. All right. So you now have, this seems so like straightforward and simple, but candidly back in 2013, I didn't have this. I was so lost when I went to interviews. Now I know this is a lot, but candidly, like it's a very simple and easy to understand and fun way to basically break down that problem of what travel app should we build into its component pieces with a focus on execution. You literally have what Tom King had that got him his very first product manager job with actually 0 professional experience. You have now what Tony Garcia basically told me, like, holy cow, you need to write a book around this. Cause like this, I never thought about my job like this. And boy, this is so simple. So in his words, he goes, it's first principle stuff, because this is how you land on the 10X idea. All right. At this point in the talk, I've given this talk many times, but at this point in the talk, I will tell you, this is also part of the talk where people ask me, where I do get a question, or I've been getting a question like, okay, Drew, how can we go deeper with this material and you? And so if that's something that you guys want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about that at this stage. Anybody want to, but I want to make sure that, that's something you actually want to talk about, but I'm happy to talk about how you can go deeper with this material and that sort of thing. By show of hands or by voice, just, yeah, do I have your permission to do that?
Yeah, I'm curious, but I also have a question on the slide.
All right, go for it.
So the question on the slide, maybe you already mentioned that the under identify ideas, B is people, and then prioritization, A is customer. What's the difference? I mean, I know what a customer is, but what do you mean by people?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I tried to. So there's literally 3 questions. I literally write. I'm sorry. Your name is
Galia.
Galia? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
Galia.
Got it. Okay, Galia, great question. Yeah, the 3 questions I write. Unfortunately, they don't fit on the slide, so I had to abbreviate. So let me just explain. So the first question is, how can we reduce the number of steps that people take to make the progress today? The next question is, how can we help more people make that progress? And then the third question is, how can we help more people make that progress in more contexts, like in more situations?
Okay.
Whereas in prioritization under the customer, we're saying, hey, listen, we're going back to that progress statement. Like when I travel, I want to feel like a local. So I have a last remember to tell my grandkids, are we helping the customer make that progress? All right. So I could basically go up there and swap out people with customer or swap customer people. We're talking about the same thing. Sorry for the confusion.
Oh, thank you.
All right, cool. All right, I saw some hands, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about how you can go deeper in the material, that sort of thing. Yeah, so here's the deal. I'm just going to actually stop sharing this screen. I'm going to go to another screen. I will just say, basically, past attendees of this talk have basically asked me to create what I'm about to show you. I have actually I'm in the process of creating it now because I have found that that this stuff has helped people so much that I actually really just rather spend all my time helping people basically make the progress they want by applying understand, identify, execute, starting as product managers. And so my goal is that over the next 12 to 18 months, I want 10,000 people to be able to say, understand, identify, execute, made a difference in their lives. And I'm starting with product managers because product managers don't need to suffer or struggle anymore. And so anyway, let me share with you what you got. And by the way, yeah, so what I'm about to show you, you'll be able to find it at this URL, understandidentifyexecute.com. All right, let me stop showing that. Let me share another screen with you. All right, where is it? Where is it? Where did that go? Actually, give me 1 second. Is that it? Nope. Yeah, so I want this, yep, here we go. Here we go. So I'm creating a cohort-based course. It's a 4 to 6 week course is what I'm creating right now. And it's everything. It's basically a lot of things I taught you. Let me go through a few of the things. So we've already covered, it doesn't make a difference where you're at. This is here to teach you. It's a 4 to 6 week cohort-based course. It's teach you how to think and communicate like a top product leader. So you can land an interview, ace the interview, get promoted, like Tom said, get raises. Tony Garcia just said, make me a far better product leader. How we go about doing that is, let me just show you the outline of the course, what it is. There'll be a curriculum piece. I will walk you through understand, identify, execute in a lot more detail. And then eventually what we're going to do is then we move into a module where we're going to do some coaching, which is I'm literally going to coach you on how to answer the questions, what to build, how to execute within the timeframes you'll actually be given within the context of an interview. Then we'll do practice interviews. And then what I'm doing right now is actually I'm really flattered, but I have a few friends that, a few I knew a few of the recruiters at the companies I worked at. And when it's very cool. They reach out to me from time to time saying, hey, do you know a PM? Because from one of your teams, because they're usually, we know that you've taught them this language and they tend to be really good. So can you send me their way? And I'm like, so now when they reach out to me, I'm like, hey, listen, you know what? I'm actually thinking about creating this course. And literally Casey, one of my recruiter from the company I worked at years ago was like, hey, listen, can I do a career day with those people? I was like, whoa, okay. I was like, well, actually that'd be kind of cool because people that come into this course, I bet you're all looking for jobs. And Casey's like, yeah, well, I'll set them up. Because, but I like the fact that, you're going to teach them this language because he goes, it increases the probability that when I hire this person, that they're going to succeed. Yeah. Unfortunately, the reality is only about 30% of product managers actually work out because most of them actually struggle with how to basically break down a product problem into component parts and execute on it. And so they tend to fizzle out because they struggle to establish credibility with their teams. So anyway, so the other part is basically I'm going to host like a virtual career day where I'll have recruiters from, top companies, but as well as some good, cool startups that are promising startups that are growing, come in and basically give you, talk about their company. They'll talk to you about their interview best practices. And then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to be teaching you guys how to actually do a product teardown. I find that product teardowns are far more valuable than a CV or a resume. All right. They're far more valuable. Like when I was a hiring manager, if I saw a CV, I looked at them like, great, they went to a great school. It sounds like they had wonderful experiences. I don't know whether they had the core skills to be a successful PM. As I just showed you with Tom King, he had no university education, does not make, and he didn't have any professional experience. But Tom's got the drive, the persistence, the tenacity. Tom basically knows how to, he also has some other abilities that they just don't teach you in school, or you don't learn on the job. You just have to have them. I will work with you on those things, but the point being is that what's more valuable to me as a hiring manager, because actually I can teach you a lot of those qualities. What's more valuable to me is that I just need to understand how you think through a product problem. And actually the way I got Tom his job, Tom basically was like, the first week he came to me, he goes, here's my CV, can you review it? I told him, I said, and then we got on a call, he goes, did you review my CV? I said, no, actually I deleted it. He was like, what? Because Drew, he goes, I need a job in 3 weeks. I said, yeah, here's how we're going to do it. You're going to break, you're going to tell me about a product that you love using, and we're going to tear it down using understand, identify, execute to make it better. And then you're going to write that up, and you're going to put it in a Medium post, and you're going to share the link for the Medium post with hiring managers and recruiters. So back to my friend Casey, when I told Casey, this is what I do, Casey's like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. He goes, I want to come to your career day, get the links to these product teardowns, so then I can just forward them to hiring managers. And then the hiring manager can decide whether they like how you think, and they'll talk to you. But candidly, most hiring managers will end up talking to you because nobody's coming to them with product teardowns. But that's ultimately what hiring managers care about. Like, how do you think and how do you communicate? I can teach everything else. And I can teach you how to think and communicate, but I just need a rough understanding of what I'm starting with. All right. So anyway, so then there's a bunch of bonus content I'll put in here, which is, we already started talking about, talk more deeply, specifically like how you're being evaluated during the interview. Yeah, you already got a hint, like I told you in the very beginning, like, guys, lean in, because this is how you're being evaluated. Like, do you lean in or do you shy away? If you shy away and I put you in that's not going to work, because I'm going to put you in a room with 20 engineers and designers, analysts for basically a design meeting, of which your job is to facilitate a design conversation to come up with product concepts. If you cannot lean in, like, I don't think that conversation is going to go too well. So I'm not going to put you in that room, because I don't want to see you fail, and I don't want to. It's not fail. I just don't want to see you like struggle, right? So there's a bunch of things that you're being evaluated on that are nonverbal, as well as verbal. Anyway, also how to ace the written case study. So yeah, in the interview process, if you get past the first round, they usually give you a written case study. You got to take it home. You have 48 hours to do. Understand, identify, execute makes that case study so easy to just dispense with. Tom was really nervous about that. We did the case study. He was like, wow, I got that done in 2 hours. He handed it in for the job he's at now, where they hired him as a senior product manager. The director of product goes, I was so impressed by your case study. He goes, I want you to teach me understand, identify, execute. So I'll make it easy. This language makes it easy to dispense with the written case study, which you get in the interview process, many interview process. And then, yeah, also how to land a product manager interview if you have no experience. Bonus curriculum is, yeah, down here, like here's Tom King. Another guy, Matt Herrick. Matt, yeah, he was in the PM. Actually, Matt used to work for me. He was a product manager, reported to me when I was a product lead, geez, back in 2014. Anyway, but not anyway. Matt basically was, unfortunately, I had leadership wanted me to let Matt go. And I tried to work with Matt as much as I could, but Matt was just resistant to learning how to think and communicate like a top product leader for whatever reasons. He eventually was let go. We reconnected like 2 years later, and he told me, he goes, hey, in my next job, there was another PM that basically taught me the importance of what you were, taught me some of the things you were trying to teach me. And I finally realized I need to think like that. And I've really embraced it. And now he came back to me, we worked together. Now the guy's actually just, Google now wants him to join as a product leader. Like, guy's really turned his career around. But the one thing he told me was, he goes, Drew, the one thing I really liked about what you taught me was you taught me how to build growth into a product. So yeah, my expertise when I was a product guy, I was very good at building growth into a product. That is, I could build growth loops into products. So when I was at Facebook, actually, I ultimately worked on Facebook's growth team, which is like the oldest, most established team in all of Facebook. It's why Facebook went from like whatever, 1 million to 1 billion users. But anyway, that was the team I was on. So we have a very intimate understanding about how to build growth into a product in a way where it helps people make the progress they want to make with ancillary benefit back to the business. And then the other thing is I put in here, you may have, I talk about how to build from the heart. So you may have recalled I talked about mission, vision, architecture, but it was like mission / intention, vision / beliefs, architecture / invention. Well, when you're just starting out with a startup, I've had a few startups of my own, you know, you don't necessarily have a mission, vision, architecture. What you have is like, well, I intend to help people do this. I got some beliefs around how I can help them do it. And here's my first cut at what my invention is going to do, what my invention will be to help them do that, right? That's how to build from a heart. And it's important to understand how to navigate that intention and invention belief model. So you are actually ultimately building something that not only helps people, but it'll have benefit back to your project. All right.
I have 2 questions, but I don't want to interrupt your train of thoughts. So just letting you know when you have a good stopping point.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm almost done. We're going to get to, I'm just going to wrap up with this, tell a short little story to end up, and then we have a Q&A session.
Okay.
So yeah, I usually make it interactive. I'm just looking at the time. We're already past time. So let me just keep on going real fast. Yeah, when you guys come to this page, right, you can read, I'm very flattered. Tom and Matt wrote testimonials, but they wrote really long testimonials. And at first, when they wrote these long, I told them, I was like, guys, I don't think this is going to be good. And then they said, read it. And when they read it, I was actually, it brought me to tears because apparently I made such a difference in their lives. So I'm really flattered by those, but have a read them yourself. Yeah, cost wise. So basically I've asked people, I've given this, I asked Tom, I asked Matt, I asked Tony, I asked a bunch of people. They're like, hey, this is a $10,000 program. I was like, well, I'm not charging $10,000 because not everybody has $10,000. Like, that's just kind of crazy. So basically the program basically ultimately is going to cost around $3,000, but and the way I look at it is that $3,000 is enough to allow me to basically do this full time, go around and give this talk full time. And at the same time, it's beneficial. Tom helped me understand this, but the going rate for a first-time product manager is $120,000 a year. That's the starting salary. So $3,000 basically is less than 3% of your starting salary. But here's the deal: for the first 50 people that sign up for this program, and I already got about 20 or 25 people signed up now. I'm just charging about less than $1,000 for it. So anyway, and like I said, it's everything we cover there. Yeah, listen, you know, this isn't going to be for everybody. So happy to, you know, I got a money back guarantee, 100% money back guarantee for the first 30 days. Happy to give you your money back if it's not for you. All right, cool. Let me just go back to the, let me stop sharing this. And I just want to wrap up with a quick little story, and then we can take questions. Whoops, not that. Yep, there. Again, it's understandidentifyexecute.com. Sure, somehow we could circulate that URL around afterwards. Cool. Yeah, here we go. I'll just say this: you may be feeling like you're drinking from a fire hose right now. That's natural. Getting an education at MIT feels like drinking from a fire hose, and you know, students and faculties agree with that. And based upon my experience as a student at MIT, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And so what you're actually looking at here is back in 1991. Yeah, sorry, I think you can see it now, but back in 1991. Anyway, at MIT, basically people do hacks every year. So back in 1991, the MIT hackers were up to it again. This time they literally took a fire hydrant and a fire hose. They poured a concrete base overnight, put this all in place, and they put it right in front of a freshman lecture hall. And it was at the end of the second semester. So basically, it was, at this point in time, as a freshman, like, you're swimming. And literally, when you went to get a drink of water out of this water fountain, you'd hit the button, and literally they had redone the plumbing too. So literally you had a jet stream of water coming out of the fire hose hitting you in the face. Anyway, that's all to say is that, listen, getting an education in product management can also feel like drinking from a fire hose. All right. And yes, while I have a program that people have asked me to set up so to make it easier for them to digest all that, to break it down so you don't feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, you don't need that program. All right. I offer it, but you don't need it, because all you need to do is you just need to remember 4 things. Break down the big problem into pieces. So when I ask you what travel app should you build, and I say, how would you approach doing this? You guys start asking really good questions, but think about, like, how could you break that problem down? So instead of saying, hey, well, okay, you actually start doing, say, well, I'd like to understand the customers. Maybe you just say, well, look, yeah, like, let me just understand, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? Like, what's the best way to define the problem? Listen, one of my, Albert Einstein. He was once asked back in, I think, the 50s, something like that. Anyway, he was asked, like, hey, if you were given 1 hour, and you may have heard this being CMU people, like, you know, we hear it all the time at MIT, but maybe you're hearing the CMU. But anyway, you know, Albert Einstein was once asked, like, hey, if you were given 1 hour to solve a problem, how would you spend your time? Does anybody know? Anybody ever heard this? No? Okay, yes. Okay, well, anyway, what he basically said was, he goes, I'd spend the first 55 minutes defining the problem, and then the last 5 minutes actually coming up with a solution. The 10x solution is in how you define the problem. Break the problem down into pieces. Play with the pieces, move the pieces around. Like it's like a jigsaw puzzle, move them around, see how you can define the problem in a novel way. My understand process helps you do that. It says, okay, customers want to make this progress. Trust me, this is where Tony said, he goes, this is what makes me way better at my day job. PMs are not thinking, typical product managers, even the best product managers, best product leaders are not thinking in terms of progress. They're thinking in terms of needs, wants, and desires, which are actually kind of like noise. It's like noise in a data set. It's not as bad of noise as like customer demographic and product attributes, but it's still noisy. You want the signal. What progress, what are people fundamentally trying to get done with your product? All right. Like for instance, right, we just saw people are, I said, we're going to build a product that's going to connect people with hosts that want to, host them over for dinner. Do you think people, that mom and dad and their kids are signing up for that product because they want to have dinner? No, they're signing up because they want to connect with a local who can give them local recommendations. That's really the progress they want to make. But on the surface, it looks like we're building a whatever, match you for dinner type of event product. That's not the progress people are trying to make. So break down the problem, big problem into pieces. Play with those pieces, identify the problems and solutions, focus on having value and impact, and make intentional creative design choices. All right, that's how you're going to establish credibility as a product manager, whether you've been doing this for a long time or whether you're just starting out. Cool. Questions? Galia, I know you got a question. Go for it.
Yes, I do. I have two questions. First one is about the product teardown. So basically what you recommend is picking up any app or any product that that we use on a daily basis or a favorite or something, and just going through the process that you just explained and kind of like tear it down into how you would make it even a better experience for the customer, how you would solve even more pain points, how can you, take it up to the next level.
Yes. So yeah, sometimes in this talk, like I have more time and I usually go through that, but also I should have mentioned like the how to execute question is the other big question, right? You have to be able to answer. I didn't have time to go through that, but yeah, basically, I go through both of them in the program. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I might be back for another talk and I can go through both of those things again, but we'll see. But yes, so I'm using understand, identify, execute to break those things down. Now in how to execute, I will say in the product teardown, well, back up. So in how to execute, I apply understand, identify, execute, but there are slightly different elements under understand, identify, execute, because usually you're dealing with a live product at that point in time, right? When I was telling you, when I did the Zynga interview, they were like, hey, listen, your game is live. Daily active users is down. What do you do? All right. When you're answering the question, what to build, that's testing you, like, how do you take an ambiguous problem and turn it into a first-time product? Mm-hmm. But then the other half of your job, or basically the other 30, 40% of your job is like, okay, your product's live, things aren't going well. How do you make decisions to get it back on track? Mm-hmm. And so I use understand, identify, execute, but they're different. The components underneath them are slightly different because they're dealing with a live product. Right. And then in the product teardown, the reason I mention that is because it depends upon where I'm going with this. If you're tearing down a live product, it's a slightly different approach than what I just showed you now. If you're tearing down, if you're saying, hey, listen, company XYZ, I'm interested in applying to you, and I know that your mission is to do this, so why don't you build this type of product? Like you're coming up with a brand new product with them? Sure, right? You can use what you learned here today. It all depends upon the level of maturity of the product that you're dealing with. Okay. Does that answer your question? I mean,
yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so basically there are different parameters that we need to think about when we're thinking about
yes, but you always will be using the language of understand, identify, execute. It's just there's slightly different parameters in the understand, identify, execute when the product is live.
Got it.
Yeah, there's but yeah, it's like some simple formulas you just got to keep in mind when you're dealing with that in order to understand, identify, and yeah. Anyway, we go into that later. You said there's a second question. Do you guys?
Yeah, the second question is, so in terms of interviews, so yesterday I had an interview with a startup and I was prepared to answer these types of questions. And they asked me about my past experience, which I am a TPM. So I have not, while I have not, done the literal work of a product manager from A to Z, I have interacted and touched on it. So I think in the way that I answered my questions, it did not kind of use, I don't know, the language, so it didn't show that. So my question is, how do you address this in terms of past experience? Like you said, you've talked to people who have never been even on a tech team. and they made it into product. And as a matter of fact, I was going through some groups that I'm a part of, and people were talking about their experiences, and there's a ton of people who were saying, like, somebody graduated from journalism or psychology, and they got, like, straight after that they got a product position. And I've been in the industry for like 15 years and have a bachelor in computer science and a master's from Carnegie Mellon, and I am a TPM and kind of still on the fence. So
the question is,
how do you address this discrepancy in terms of past experience moving into product, when the question is not about how you would
yeah, sure, that question basically is okay. So for me, so my answer is an individual answer. It's an individual, because it's all up to us as individuals how you want to present yourselves. But typically, if I'm in that situation, the way I present it is to say, hey, listen, here's fundamentally my why. Here's what gets me up in the morning, and it aligns with what you guys are trying to do. And so I'm trying to basically make a switch. I'm trying to think of when was the last time I did that. Yeah, actually, yeah.
So Drew, can I add
yeah,
points?
Yeah, go for it.
So I don't know who asked the question. But I think I was in a very similar boat, Galia, right? So when I was trying to make a move into PM role, right, I had TPM under my belt. I'd also done a lot on the business side. But I think for me, the way, and I think this is one of the questions that I think I had actually worked with Drew on, is that you need to go into a product management interview with a product thinking mind frame, right? So they could ask you about your experience, and it's now up to you to how you're going to frame the question. At the end of the day, a product management solves a lot of problems. They are there to make decisions, right? They are made to like remove blockers wherever there are, and they have to add some level of creativity, right? And so I think those are the things that I focused on my answers on what I've done in the past, right? And how I can add value. So some of the product breakdown things that Drew talked about is that you have a product, you can break it down by, it's all based on your mind frame, right? You could say like, I did this, move these blockers, or I thought about how to solve the problems. And when people look at your thing, they're going to hear about it, right? The title that you owe is, only in your mind that blocks you to some extent. And I think that was one of my biggest hurdles that I had to go through. How do I kind of go out of the mind frame and get into the mind of a product manager and start talking like that? And that's where I think this language that Drew talks about really helps. So I don't know how you answer the question, but that was my experience, and so I thought I had to relate it.
So maybe I should say the question to provide a little clarity. The question in itself was a little different for me. So question was like, tell me how you interacted with designers and engineers. My interaction as a TPM is going to be different from a product designer. So it certainly will show a difference. So the answer to that is where the interviewer was like, oh, I don't think this is going to work. So
yes, I think, but I think it's a great point he just made, and I really appreciate him sharing that. I will say, when I was at Facebook, we had TPMs interviewed for product manager roles, so internal transfers. The best, thank you for sharing that, because that actually sparked one memory I had, but one particular TPM. Yeah, the language that how a TPM interacts with an engineer designer, how they interact with an engineer is way different than how a product manager interacts. Totally get it. What this TPM did, though, was, the TPM basically came to me and said, hey, listen, I basically asked him, like, hey, I remember asking him, I said, I asked him, how does your TPM experience, how do you think your TPM experience is going to make you successful as a product manager? And what he kind of was a little stumped at it, but he basically explained, like, okay, here's basically, he actually started using some understand, identify, execute language. It wasn't quite that, but I could tell that's where he was going. He was like, well, listen, he goes, basically, I had to take this huge technical problem, and let me just tell you what the problem was. Here's how I defined the problem. Here's how I identified solutions. And then here's how we tested those solutions. Okay. And he goes, I basically want to take, and he was telling me, he goes, I basically want to take that process, but I want to do it more on the front end of the customer experience and less on the back end. And that's why I want to become a product manager. And I walked away like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, okay, you can think like a product manager. You think like a product manager.
Okay.
And I could see, and I see that from your past work, because you just walked me through that. Because the point is, you know, at the end of the day, TPMs and PMs, we're all solving problems.
Right.
All right. That's a common, you have to find the common thread, to find the
Yeah.
common language.
Okay.
And we're all, when you're solving a problem, you have to understand the problem. You got to identify a solution. You got to execute on it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I that was my mistake. I answered the past, but I didn't put, I didn't say that as a product manager, this is how it would.
Yeah, Gali, you know, it's a challenge. You know, listen, I'm not saying you're beating yourself up. Don't beat yourself up, because here's the thing is, not every interviewer is a great interviewer.
Yeah, and I was a little confused
question,
because, like, there were no questions, no product questions that I would expect, like from things like you said in the presentation. Not at all. It was all like from my resume about the past, and it was, to me, it was confusing as a product interview.
If anything, I'll give you a hint. I think you're already picking up on it. But usually, I remember early in my product manager career, I got into interviews like that, and I actually walked away thinking, you know, saying to myself, "That's a huge red flag for me. I don't want to work here." Because I'm like, if the interviewer is basically asking these questions, it's sort of like, how much does this interviewer like? I don't know how good of a product manager is this person? And by the way, I'm going to be working for this person. So,
I had a point to this. If that person, like, you know, I've taken a lot of interviews also. If that interviewer to some extent had read your resume, he knew you were a TPM, right? Then, like, so I don't know what he is trying to ratify or validate on his end is that he knows you are a TPM, right? He knows you are interviewing for a PM. So I think some of the questions could have been aligned. And Drew, I think you're right? Not everybody's a great interviewer. And I think it's better you don't get into those roles. So
yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Cool. Yeah, no worries. Anybody else? What other questions can we answer?
I have a I guess a question regarding what you said about the philosophy that you took, stance you took on your interview. More so like Steve Jobs says that people don't know what they want until they see it, instead of asking people. And then you also mentioned that you don't necessarily need to be an expert to be able to solve these problems. But in my own field, I've seen so many people fail because they kind of take a stab at it and try different things, even experts that go and have certain intellectual property registered, and it really misses the point. And they put something out there and it really doesn't do as well as they thought. And I'm just wondering how you can not like hire a consultant for the particular problem that you're solving and then trying to say that, presume that you can fix it yourself and do better than anyone else.
No, it's a great question. So I appreciate bringing up. First of all, yeah, I'm not presuming that we can fix it. I guess just a little pull back another layer of the onion for me in terms of my background. So basically, I've been part of teams that have basically conceived, started, and grown 10 businesses. And some of those businesses succeeded, some failed, many under somewhere in the middle. And the one thing that, so my viewpoint or my belief there is mostly based upon personal experience, having those businesses were all across different industries, but they were all technology businesses. Well, no, not all of them. Actually, 8 of them were technology businesses. The other 2 were non-technology. But the common thing I found was that in each case where sometimes we had an expert, sometimes we brought in a consultant, and then other times we didn't bring in an expert, didn't bring in a consultant. What I found 2 things that when we brought in a consultant and expert happened in the team. So for us, there's sort of this incubation process that we go through to sort of, you know, identify pains, test value props for solving those pains, and then sort of testing like a low fidelity prototype of how do you solve that, or whether the solution will work. In each case, what I found was 2 things. One is that other people on the team would defer to the expert or the consultant, which was not most of the time that wasn't helpful, because we needed everybody to be thinking and of expressing their viewpoints so we could build on what everybody was thinking and saying. The second thing I also discovered was that the consultants and experts, for the most part, I think there's one exception. He was definitely, actually, no, it was a she. She was a great exception. For the most part, when other team members would say, hey, what if we did this? the response was like from the expert consultant, like, yeah, other people have tried that. We've tried that, or they've like, I've tried something near that. Let's not waste time on that. And what ends up happening is like, well, you may have tried it and that's fine, right? But don't be so quick to actually just toss it into the waste bin right now as we're trying to come up with a bunch of ideas, because something you may have tried, yeah, may not work on its own. But if we take that and we marry it with something else that was said in that, you know, another idea that somebody's come up with, now all of a sudden, right, we either make that thing work or we come up with something that's even better. And so what I found was that, you know, getting to the 10X idea is more challenging. It seemed to be, based on my personal experience, always more challenging when we had the dynamics in the room of somebody being dismissive of ideas, or, you know, people deferring and saying, well, they're the experts, they would know. And really what it boiled down to for me was I discovered that there's just these two mindsets that as humans that we have. And it doesn't mean and one mindset is not better than the other mindset. It's just how some, you know, how some of us think. Is some of us have the mindset that we feel the need, but we have to have the right answer starting out with. You know, it's coming out of the gates, we need to have the right answer, or we want to have the right answer. And then there are other people say, well, look, you know, starting out with, I don't care if I don't have the right answer. It's just so long as I can learn my way to the right answer. And so in those cases, when we typically brought an expert and consultant, they may have had that mindset, like, I'll figure out my way to the right answer, but they kind of at that point in time had come in and like, hey, I already kind of know like what a right answer is probably going to be here. And that just kind of stymied the discussion, which ultimately led to the 10X idea. So don't mean to be completely dismissive of, you know, the value of experts and consultants. I'm just simply saying, based on my experiences, that was the dynamic that TENDA created, which kind of stymied the conversation, which is ultimately what you need to kind of get to the 10X idea.
Right. It seems like more of a function of not following the rules of brainstorming, where you do not do the critique at the very initial phase of ideas. And perhaps if there were more two consultants, then there may have been a slightly different dynamic with ideas being able to kind of go back and forth. But anyway, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
appreciate your.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks.
Other questions? I will tell you, I actually gave this talk when I was at Zynga. I gave this talk to a room of 175 product managers, designers, and engineers. At the end, I said, does anybody have any questions? And Tony Garcia was in the room. That's when he heard the talk. Actually, no, yeah, you heard the talk then, and you heard the talk a few years later. But anyway, I said, are there any questions? And everybody in the room just stared at me. And I was sort of like, okay. I literally was like, okay, either what I'm saying, you guys are just totally like, this is just a waste of your time, or you know, or yeah, maybe it's just a waste of time. Anyway, I walked out of there, and a lot of people came up to me afterwards. They said, listen, this was my first time. I was only at Zynga for like a month. I gave this talk. And anyway, somebody came up to me afterwards. They've been at Zynga since the beginning, and said, actually, that talk went incredibly well. I was like, really? Nobody asked questions? He goes, yeah. He goes, you completely got them thinking. So if anything, I at least am happy that you were able to take the time, take your time out of your day, spend it with me, so I could kind of share with you a way of thinking that I've developed over time, a language I've developed over time, and hopefully it'll be beneficial, you know, in some aspect of your journey, some way along the line. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
It was very helpful. I think I asked a ton of questions, so no, it was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to let people know, like, don't feel compelled to have to ask a question. Just.
And one last question. Do you mind if I connect with you on LinkedIn and maybe like, you know, schedule time to talk after that for like 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, I will. Yeah, feel free to LinkedIn. Maybe in terms of time to talk, I'll try to make time. Just yeah, please understand. I got. It may be a little while. Yeah, it's just I got a pretty packed calendar right now and nowadays. But yes, I feel free. Send me a LinkedIn invite. I will try to connect when I can connect. And yeah, we can chat from there.
Thank you.
All right. I think I'll turn it back over to the moderators. Oops.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. I think, Sijit, do you have any parting thoughts? I think we are good, right? We are already over time, so. Thank you, guys.
You're mute. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you, Drew.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.